In 2014, France lost one of its most prized industrial assets in what appeared to be a routine business transaction. But this wasn't just any sale, it was the systematic dismantling of a company that held the keys to nuclear power infrastructure worldwide. This is the story of how General Electric orchestrated one of the most sophisticated corporate takeovers in modern history, walking away with decades of French nuclear expertise for a fraction of its true value. Founded in 1928, Alstom had spent nearly a century perfecting the art of making things move and generating power. From the sleek TGV trains that transformed French transportation to the massive turbines humming inside nuclear reactors, Alstom's fingerprints were everywhere. But what made Alstom truly special is that they weren't just building machines, they were building the backbone of national sovereignty. The company's nuclear division manufactured the Arabelle steam turbines, engineering marvels that convert nuclear fission into electricity. These were technological masterpieces that fewer than 5 companies worldwide could produce at the required scale and precision. More than 30% of the world's nuclear power stations operating today use Alstom-made equipment, making the company an indispensable player in global energy infrastructure. For France, a nation that derives roughly 70% of its electrical power from nuclear power, Alstom represented something even more valuable than profit: energy independence. When you control the turbines, you control the power grid, and when you control the power grid, you hold the keys to a nation's future. Alstom engineers had mastered the balance of metallurgy, thermodynamics, and precision manufacturing required to build turbines that could withstand the extreme conditions inside nuclear reactors. We're talking about components that must operate flawlessly for decades under temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Celsius and pressures that would crush a submarine. One small flaw and you're looking at a potential catastrophic failure. By 2010, Alstom employed over 120,000 people across 70 countries, with annual revenues exceeding 20 billion euros. The company had built high-speed rail networks across Europe and Asia, supplied power generation equipment to emerging markets, and maintained a technological edge that took decades to develop. But beneath this impressive facade, cracks were beginning to show. The 2008 financial crisis had hit industrial companies hard, and of course, Alstom was no exception. Debt was mounting, cash flow was tightening, and the company was struggling to secure financing for large-scale projects. In the unforgiving world of international business, financial vulnerability is blood in the water, and the sharks were circling. April 14, 2013, Frederick Pierucci, an executive of Alstom, was arrested by the FBI when his plane arrived at New York's John F. Kennedy's International Airport. The charge? Allegedly bribing Indonesian officials to secure a $118 million power plant contract for the Tehran project. On the surface, this looked like standard corporate corruption, the kind of unseemly business practice that unfortunately occurs in international deals. But Pierucci's arrest wasn't just about justice. Oh man, it was about timing. And timing, as they say, is everything. The DOJ said Pierucci and other Alstom executives bribed a member of the Indonesian parliament and officials at Perusahaan Listrik Negara, PLN, the state-owned electric company. The allegations involved a complex web of consultants, shell companies, and payments designed to secure lucrative infrastructure contracts. The first consultant retained by the defendants allegedly received hundreds of thousands of dollars in his Maryland bank account to be used to bribe the member of parliament. Now, the story gets interesting and deeply suspicious. Pierucci would later claim that his arrest was far from coincidental. In April 2014, Pierucci learned that the energy section of Alstom was sold to the American company General Electric. This led him to conclude that his arrest, denial of bail, and continued imprisonment were part of a strategy of economic warfare and hostage diplomacy. Think about the psychological pressure this created. While Pierucci sat in an American prison, Alstom's leadership was frantically trying to manage a crisis that seemed to expand daily. On the 27th of March 2014, Bloomberg announces that the DOJ has extended its Alstom investigation to countries involving suspected bribery. Suddenly, what started as a single executive's legal troubles had metastasized into a company-wide investigation threatening the entire organization. The pressure was relentless and sophisticated. American prosecutors were systematically dismantling Alstom's reputation and financial stability. Every week brought new headlines, new investigations, new uncertainty. For a company trying to secure major international contracts, this kind of legal cloud was commercially devastating. Meanwhile, General Electric, Alstom's primary competitor in the power generation market, watched with keen interest. GE executives knew that a weakened Alstom represented the opportunity of a lifetime. Here was a chance to acquire decades of nuclear engineering expertise, eliminate a major competitor, and gain access to strategic technologies that would normally be protected by national security considerations. The timing was, as Parucci later described it, too perfect to be coincidental. While Alstom executives were distracted by legal battles and mounting pressure from American authorities, their negotiating position was deteriorating rapidly. It's hard to drive a hard bargain when your company is under federal investigation and your executives are facing potential prison time. By early 2014, the pressure had become unbearable. General Electric, GE, announced that it had reached a deal to purchase Alstom's power and grid divisions for $17 billion, or 12.4 billion euros. On paper, this looked like a substantial sum. 17 billion is serious money by any measure, but for what GE was acquiring, it represented one of the greatest corporate bargains in modern history. What exactly was GE buying? They weren't just purchasing factories and equipment, they were acquiring the intellectual property, engineering expertise, and manufacturing capabilities that represented centuries of accumulated knowledge. Alstom's nuclear division alone was worth far more than the entire purchase price, considering the strategic value of controlling global nuclear power infrastructure. The acquisition gave GE immediate access to Alstom's crown jewel, the Arabelle steam turbine technology. These turbines were the technological heart of nuclear power plants worldwide. Alstom had been chosen by French utility EDF to supply the turbine island for the world's biggest European pressurized reactor nuclear power plant at Flamanville, France. GE was essentially buying the keys to global nuclear infrastructure. But the real genius of the acquisition lay in its strategic implications. By controlling Alstom's nuclear technology, GE gained leverage over any country operating nuclear power plants with Alstom-built components. Need maintenance, upgrades, replacement parts? You now had to deal with an American company subject to American laws, American sanctions, and American foreign policy objectives. The French government stated it did not back GE's bid, citing concerns on the future of Alstom's rail division as a smaller separate entity, suggesting that GE transfer its own rail division to Alstom. Other concerns were over the civil nuclear field's national dependence and French jobs. The French government understood exactly what was at stake. National sovereignty was being sold to a foreign power. In response to the mounting crisis, France issued a decree, Decret 2014-479 due 14 May 2014, nicknamed Decret Alstom, extending the power of the state to veto the takeover of strategic interests into areas of energy supply, water, transport, telecoms, and public health. Too little, too late. The horse had already bolted from the stable. The deal structure was carefully crafted to address some political concerns while maintaining GE's strategic control. Alstom's board has unanimously recommended its shareholders accept a revised offer for its power and grid businesses from GE that will see Alstom retain a 50% interest in its nuclear steam turbine business. Alstom pleads guilty and agrees to pay $772 million in criminal penalty to resolve foreign bribery charges. The company that had been France's industrial champion was now a convicted criminal, paying hundreds of millions in fines while its most valuable assets were transferred to American control. The Alstom scandal represents something far more significant than a corporate acquisition. It was a case study in how economic warfare can be conducted in the modern global economy. By 2015, GE had successfully acquired one of Europe's most strategic industrial companies, gaining access to nuclear technologies that had taken decades to develop. But wait, the story doesn't end there. The French government, stung by this strategic defeat, eventually fought back. EDF confirmed it would buy a France-based nuclear turbine unit from General Electric as the state-owned utility seeks to bundle nuclear activities deemed as strategic in France's new push for multi-billion investments into new reactors. On May 31, 2024, EDF officially takes over the nuclear activities of GE Vernova, the successor to General Electric, including the maintenance and manufacture of Arabelle turbines. France essentially had to buy back its own technology at a premium nearly a decade after losing it. The irony is almost too perfect. A nation that pioneered nuclear technology had to repurchase its own innovations from the American company that had acquired them through what many consider corporate espionage disguised as law enforcement. Frederick Perucci, the executive whose arrest had triggered this entire sequence of events, eventually wrote a book about his experience. The American Trap, a book by former Alstom CEO Frederick Perucci, has become a surprise hit in China. The book's popularity in China provided a roadmap for understanding how American authorities could use legal pressure to achieve strategic objectives. The Alstom case became a template that other nations studied carefully. It demonstrates how a combination of legal pressure, media attention, and financial warfare could be used to acquire strategic assets that would normally be protected by national security considerations. The techniques pioneered in the Alstom acquisition would later surface in other high-profile cases, including the pursuit of Chinese technology companies. For France, the lesson was painful but clear. In the modern global economy, industrial sovereignty requires constant vigilance. The country that had once dominated nuclear technology through companies like Alstom learned that technological leadership means nothing without the legal and financial infrastructure to protect it. The real cost of the Alstom scandal wasn't just financial, it was brutally strategic. For nearly a decade, France lost control over technologies that were fundamental to its energy independence. The country that had built its post-war prosperity on nuclear power found itself dependent on an American company for the maintenance and operations of its most critical infrastructure. Could France have stopped this? What role did global politics play into the dismantling of a national treasure? These are questions that remain unanswered. What do you think? Was this a coincidence or a masterfully executed plan? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. And if this story intrigued you, wait until you hear about the Huawei scandal, a tale of espionage, technological theft, and global power struggles.